Hi everybody, welcome back to Jenn's Pens, where I talk about pretty much everything I know about fountain pens because I love them. In this video, I wanted to talk to you about if you are left-handed and are either thinking about getting into fountain pens, or if you just need some help because you're left-handed and having a little bit of trouble with using the fountain pens. So today I wanted to share with you my top 5 tips and tricks that I learned being left-handed to help you with your fountain pen journey. My first tip is to write sideways. And no, I don't mean actually turning your hand sideways, I mean turning your book sideways. For me, I use a journal daily. I use the Rhodia web notebook. And for me, I got a dot journal, and for the longest time I was writing in it like a normal journal where you write on the left side of the page and then you turn to the right page and write on that page. And the problem that I've always had being left-handed is that I always get smears on the left edge of my left hand as I drag the hand, because the hand goes over the entire left page at that point. So the trick that I figured out is to turn the notebook horizontally instead of vertically. And because I'm using a dot notebook, you can do this and it looks fine because you don't have lines on the page. You're not writing sideways over the lines. So that is my first tip, to get a dot journal, or you could also get a bullet journal with the dots in it. Sometimes they're called bullet journals, and turn it horizontally and write it sideways. That way you are not going to have your hand drag over what you've already written on the left-hand side. My second tip is to use a medium smooth paper. I know a lot of people out there who use fountain pens really love the Tomoe paper, the Tomoe River paper, because it is very smooth. You can see the sheening on it very nicely. But for us left-handers, the more ink that sits on top, the longer it takes to dry. And so it's going to be harder to write without smearing on super smooth paper. So the Rhodia web note journal that I use has sort of what I would call medium smooth paper, where it absorbs a little bit more of the ink, but it also shows the inks nicely. So it allows the inks to dry faster, get them out of your way. So again, you don't get that smearing on your left hand. Using a medium smooth paper kind of ties in with my next recommendation. So my third tip is to use inks that have certain properties that allow them to dry quickly. So there are quick dry inks. I have not used them personally because I haven't had too much of a problem with the inks that I use currently, but they do have them out there. My other recommendation is to not use a sheening ink. The way that sheening inks work is that part of the pigment actually still sits on top, and the science behind it I don't understand, but the way that it's been explained to me is that it's almost like some of the ink crystallizes on top, so the sheening is actually crystals from the ink. So when you pull across that, as you probably will with your left hand at some point, it's going to pull the sheening off of that. I have had no problems with shimmer inks. The shimmer does come off just a tiny bit, but it's not anything to the point where I've ever had a problem. It's more like one piece of glitter comes off here and there. My tip number 4 is to use smooth and or larger size nibs, or you can actually get left-handed nibs or oblique nibs as well. The pen that I have here is a Sailor Pro Gear Slim with a medium fine nib, and Japanese nibs are very fine, and this one is very, very fine. For me, it's actually a little bit scratchy and more feedbacky than probably a right-handed person would be. When left-handers write, the way that we write in English, we're actually pushing the nib, the point into the paper, whereas when you write right-handed, you're actually dragging the nib in the way that the nib is supposed to be oriented. So that's a little bit hard for me. I found that with broader nibs, like broad, medium, or the stub nibs, they work a lot better for me. This one here is a Conklin 1.1 stub, and I really like how that one feels. My last and 5th tip is it kind of ties in with the smoother nib. Try to use a lubricated ink. There are a few lubricated inks that I like to use. One of my favorites right now is the, I think it's the Monteverde Smoke Noir. I love that one. It's just a beautiful gray. It goes down and it looks almost black, and then it turns gray. It's pretty neat. It's a very straight gray. I almost want to rename it like just gray, because it's what I imagine gray in its purest form would look like. So there are a bunch of lubricated inks. Monteverde is a very good one that I found. That one's pretty lubricated. And in another video, I'll talk about some of my favorite inks. But just for this one, Monteverde Smoke Noir, most of the Monteverde ones. The other one I really like is Diamine Wild Strawberry, and I've only tried the Diamine Lilac Satin in a couple of pens because I really like it in one specific pen, but that one flows really, really well, even though it is one of the Shimmertastic inks by Diamine. So you might want to try that out too if you're looking for a shimmer ink that is actually lubricated. The other thing that you can get is White Lightning. It is something that you can put into the ink to make it lubricated, even if it is not a lubricated ink. So if you are left-handed, I definitely recommend getting that one just to have it on hand in case you do have an ink that you would like to write with if you like the color, but it's just not working for you, and see if that helps to use a lubricated ink. I wanted to add in here, it's not one of my tips, but I know this is something that gets talked about a lot, is that left-handers might want to adjust the angle of their writing. For me, if you follow these tips, I don't think you're going to have as much of a problem with smearing the ink or pulling the ink if you're using a relatively dry but lubricated ink and you're using a smooth nib and the right paper. I don't think you're going to have as much of a problem, but people do talk about if you are writing directly across the words that you just wrote to the left of you, you might want to try actually writing under that line instead, so just your hand angle to be under the line, or just your hand to be over the line, as long as you're not dragging your hand against the words that you just wrote. The other thing that I've started doing is trying to learn to write with my right hand, because I do like the way that that looks and feels, especially for calligraphy. I feel like that's probably a lot easier to do with your right hand than your left hand. So that's just something to consider that has been thrown out there. For me, I'd like to try to write with my natural angle, but if that's something that would help you, then definitely go for it. All right, so those are my top 5 tips for writing with your left hand with a fountain pen. So I do wish all of my left-handed buddies out there with the best of luck with fountain pens. I know I truly enjoy them. If you haven't tried them yet, definitely check them out. Thank you for watching. If you don't mind subscribing, if you would like to see more videos like this. Also, if you have a tip to write left-handed that I didn't cover in this video, please leave it below. I could use it, and I'm sure our other fellow left-handed writers would love to see that too. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.